I've always thought of myself as a night person, as a kind of peace that comes with the world settling down, the quiet of the late hours when everything feels slower, calmer, or at least that's what I thought before I started working the night shift in the hospital morgue. Hospitals at night aren't like you'd imagine. They're not full of wailing patients or frantic nurses rushing around. Upstairs, it's a controlled chaos. Hushed voices, footsteps, the beep of monitors, the occasional distant announcement over the PA system. But down here, in the morgue, it's just me, the hum of the cooling units, and the dead. The morgue is buried deep, 2 levels below ground. You have to pass the boiler room, walk down a narrow, dimly lit hallway, and take a sharp left into a cold, sterile space that feels more like an afterthought than a part of the hospital. It's small and efficient, built for function, not comfort. There's the desk where I spend most of my time, stacks of paperwork piling up no matter how much I tackle. There are a couple of stainless steel workstations in the middle of the room, always spotless, and the refrigeration units lining the walls. But what dominates the space are the drawers. They stretch along the far wall in neat rows labeled with numbers and names. Each one feels like a tiny, locked-up secret. Tonight, my shift started the same as always, a 10 p.m. elevator ride down with a thermos of coffee that was already lukewarm by the time I stepped into the morgue. The doors opened with a soft ding, and the cold air hit me like a wall. Even with the cooling units humming in the background, the silence down here has weight to it. It presses on you, making you notice things you'd otherwise tune out. The buzz of the fluorescent lights, the distant hum of machinery, and sometimes your own breathing. I logged the 2 bodies from earlier. One was a middle-aged man who died of a heart attack. Straightforward, no surprises. The other was an elderly woman whose cause of death was still listed as under investigation. Both had been prepped and stored before my shift, leaving me with little to do except monitor the room and process any new arrivals. It was shaping up to be one of those long, slow nights where time seems to drip by. The clock on the wall ticked with the kind of loud insistence you only notice in dead silence. My phone signal down here was, as always, useless, so I resorted to staring at it out of habit, scrolling through old texts and notifications that didn't need my attention. The drawers caught my eye, like they always do. It's hard not to look at them, even when they're sealed tight. Each one holds a story, someone's entire existence now reduced to a name and a tag. I try not to think about it too much, it's easier that way. But sometimes, sitting alone in this room with nothing but the dead for company, your mind wanders. People ask me all the time, "Isn't it creepy down there by yourself?" I usually shrug it off, make a joke about how the dead are better company than the living. And most nights, that feels true. But tonight something felt different. The air was heavier than usual. Maybe it was the cooling units working overtime, or maybe it was just my imagination. Either way, I felt it. A kind of stillness that wasn't peaceful. It was like the room itself was waiting for something. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the drawers. I couldn't get rid of the feeling they were looking back. Stupid, I know, they're just drawers, but that's the thing about working in a morgue. You start noticing the things your brain normally ignores. To break the silence, I flipped on the small radio I keep at my desk. It's old and staticky, but it works well enough. Music and static filled the room, cutting into the quiet. It helped a little, but not enough to shake the sense that tonight, something wasn't right. I don't know how long I sat there, letting the static-filled hum of the radio fill the morgue. Time in this place moves differently. Minutes can feel like hours, and hours can vanish without warning. I'd lost count of how many times I'd checked the clock on the wall. its ticking echoing over the constant noise of the refrigeration units. I was mid-sip of my lukewarm coffee when I heard it. It wasn't loud, but as I've said, the silence in here is different. My hand froze, the coffee just shy of my lips, as my eyes darted toward the source of the sound. It had come from the far wall, where the drawers were neatly lined up in rows like soldiers at attention. Just the equipment, I muttered under my breath. The morgue's setup wasn't exactly new. The drawers had their quirks. Sometimes the seals didn't catch properly, or the latches needed adjusting. But this sound wasn't familiar. It wasn't the groan of machinery or the hum of refrigerants. It was too sharp, too intentional. I set my coffee down, the ceramic mug clinking softly against the desk. For a moment I just sat there, staring at the far wall, listening. The room seemed quieter than usual, like the hum of the cooling units had faded into the background. Finally I stood, my chair squeaking against the linoleum as I pushed it back. My footsteps echoed faintly as I crossed the room, each one louder than the last in the otherwise oppressive silence. My heart wasn't racing, not yet, but I could feel a faint tension building in my chest. When I reached the wall of drawers, the source of the sound was easy to spot. One of them, third row from the top, was slightly open. The name tag, clipped to the handle, swung lazily back and forth, catching the light. The drawer hadn't opened far, just enough for me to see the edge of the white sheet inside. I stopped a few feet away, staring at it. The air felt heavier here, colder. My rational side told me it was nothing, a mechanical quirk, a loose latch. But standing there, looking at that drawer, didn't sit right with me. "All right," I muttered to myself, though my voice sounded small in the quiet. "Let's get this over with." I reached out slowly, my hand hovering over the handle. The metal was cold to the touch as I gripped it, hesitating for just a moment before sliding the drawer back into place. It moved smoothly, and the soft thunk of the latch sealing shut, breaking the silence. I stood there, hand still on the handle, staring at the closed drawer. It looked normal now, just like all the others. But I couldn't bring myself to step away. My ears strained for any sound, my eyes flicking to the name tag swinging gently, like the drawer had been opened just moments before. The morgue stayed silent. I let out a shaky breath, shaking my head as I backed away toward my desk. "It's just the equipment," I muttered again, as if saying it would make it true. But just as I reached my chair, a low groan echoed through the room. I stopped. It wasn't loud, and it didn't last long, but it was enough to send a chill through me. The sound had come from behind me, from the drawers. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the wall. All the drawers were shut tight, the name tag still, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. My fingers tightened on the edge of the desk as I forced myself to take a deep breath. "The cooling systems," I whispered to no one. "Just the cooling systems." The radio crackled faintly, the soft strains of static-filled music doing little to fill the oppressive silence. I stared at the drawers for another long moment before sinking into my chair, rubbing a hand over my face. "You got to get yourself together." I sat there trying to convince myself it was nothing, that I was letting the quiet get to me. But then the lights flickered. It wasn't a normal flicker, not the kind you barely notice before the bulbs settle. It was a sharp, jarring flash, plunging the room into total darkness for a heartbeat before the fluorescence buzzed back on. The sudden brightness felt harsh, too loud against the silence. I blinked, trying to adjust, my heart now thudding against my ribs. The morgue felt different now, like the darkness had left something behind. The flickering lights were bad enough, but it was what followed that pushed me over the edge. One moment, the morgue was bathed in that harsh, clinical fluorescence. The next, everything went black. Pitch black. I sat frozen at my desk, gripping the edge so hard my knuckles ached. The suddenness of it was jarring, like the room itself had been swallowed whole. Even the hum of the refrigeration units went silent. I've heard about power outages in the hospital before. Rare, but they happen. Usually the generators kick in almost immediately, but down here, under layers of concrete and steel, even a second of darkness feels like a lifetime. I fumbled for my phone, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The sound of my own movements felt deafening in the void. My phone's screen flared to life, its dim light casting shaky shadows across the desk. I angled it toward the rows of drawers, its glow barely reaching the far wall. Nothing moved. I told myself it was fine, that this was normal, but the silence was suffocating. My ears strained for any sound, even the hum of the cooling systems coming back to life. But all I heard was the frantic beating of my heart and the crackle of static from the radio, which had somehow stayed on through the blackout. Then came the generators. A low, distant rumble shook the floor beneath me, followed by the steady thrum of power surging back into the building. The hum of the cooling units returned, but the lights? The morgue's lights didn't come back right away. The glow of my phone felt woefully inadequate as I scanned the room, waiting for the fluorescence to flicker back to life. Seconds dragged into what felt like minutes. The longer I waited, the more I noticed the little things, the shadows in the corners of the room, the way the radio crackled like it was struggling to tune in. And then the lights returned. They didn't flicker on all at once. It was a slow, stuttering process, each bulb buzzing to life one after another, throwing patches of light across the room. It wasn't until the last bulb came on that I realized something was wrong. One of the drawers was open. I didn't hear it slide, I didn't see it move. But there it was, third row from the bottom, fully extended. The sheet covering the body inside had shifted, revealing pale, waxy feet just visible under the harsh light. My stomach turned as I forced myself to stand. My legs felt weak, like they didn't belong to me. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. No, this isn't happening." I wanted to run, to leave the room and never come back. But my feet carried me forward, step by agonizing step, until I was standing in front of the open drawer. The tag clipped to the handle caught my eye. It was the elderly woman from earlier, the one marked "Under Investigation." Her name, neatly printed in black ink, felt like a mockery of the chaos in my chest. I swallowed hard and reached out, my fingers brushing against the edge of the drawer. "Just equipment," I whispered, trying to steady myself. "It's always just equipment." But as I stared at the body inside, something fell off. The sheet covering her was crumpled near the top, as if it had been pulled. Her hand, the one resting near her side, was partially exposed, her fingers bent in a way that didn't look natural. My chest tightened. I reached for the edge of the sheet, hesitating for a second before pulling it back just enough to see her face. Her eyes were open, wide, unblinking, staring straight ahead like they had been for hours. A single tear streaked down her cheek, glistening in the fluorescent light. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as I stared at her. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. No, that's not possible." My hands fumbled for my phone, dialing 911 without thinking. My fingers trembled as I raised it to my ear, each ring feeling like an eternity. 911, what's your emergency?" The operator's calm voice jolted me back to reality. "There's a body," I stammered, barely able to get the words out. "In the morgue. Her eyes, they're open, and there's a tear She's not supposed to... I stopped, realizing how insane I sounded. "Sir, I need you to stay calm," the operator said. "Can you confirm your location?" I gave them the details, my voice shaky. "It's the hospital morgue," I said. "Something's wrong. I don't know what's happening." "An officer is on the way," the operator assured me. "Stay where you are, and try not to touch anything." I hung up without responding, my phone slipping from my hand onto the desk. My gaze flicked back to the drawer, to the woman's lifeless face and that single, impossible tear. Then came the knock at the door. The sound cut through the morgue's hum like a blade. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The hospital was quiet at this hour. No one ever came down here unless it was absolutely necessary and I hadn't called for anyone. Except the cops. My chest heaved with shallow breaths as I glanced back at the open drawer. The woman's face hadn't changed, her eyes still wide, unseeing, that tear still glinting in the harsh fluorescent light. "Okay," I muttered to myself, forcing my feet to move. "It's just the cops. It has to be." The knock came again, more impatient. "Coming," I shouted. My shoes squeaked against the linoleum as I made my way to the door. My hand hesitated on the handle for just a moment before I pulled it open. But it wasn't the cops. It was a man in scrubs, mid-40s with sharp features and a tight expression. His ID badge swung slightly from the lanyard around his neck, but I didn't bother reading it. He looked past me immediately, his eyes scanning the room like he already knew what he was looking for. "I need access," he said, brushing past me without waiting for an invitation. "Wait, what are you doing down here?" I stammered, turning to watch as he strode straight to the open drawer. "I'm with the hospital," he said curtly. "It's an urgent matter." I blinked, my thoughts scattered. I hadn't seen him before, and I'd been working here long enough to recognize most of the staff. "The police are on their way. You can't just walk in here." He didn't respond. He was already standing in front of the open drawer, his shoulders tense, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Sir," I said, taking a step closer, "I need you to explain." "She shouldn't have been left like this," he interrupted. He grabbed the edge of the drawer and slid it shut with a single, forceful motion. The latch clicked, the name tag swinging slightly as the drawer settled back into place. "What are you talking about? Who are you?" He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to call anyone," he said. My blood ran cold. "What?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "It's being handled internally. This situation doesn't concern law enforcement." I took a step back, shaking my head. No, this isn't normal. That body, her eyes were open. I saw it. Stop," he snapped, his voice cutting through my panic. "You didn't see anything." The radio on my desk crackled suddenly, the static louder than it had been all night. I flinched, my gaze darting toward it for just a moment before snapping back to the man. "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice rising. But he didn't answer. His expression softened slightly, almost like pity, as he walked past me toward the door. "You should go home," he said over his shoulder. "Let this go." I stared after him, my hands trembling. "You can't just leave. I called the cops. They'll be here any minute." He paused in the doorway, turning back to look at me. "No one's coming," he said quietly. And then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him with a dull thud. I stood there for a while, the hum of the cooling units filling the silence once again. My head spun with questions, none of them with answers I wanted to hear. Finally, I turned back to the rows of drawers. They were all shut now, silent and still, but my stomach knotted as I stared at them. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. I picked it up with shaky hands, glancing at the screen. It was the dispatcher calling me back. "Hello?" There was a silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped, but then I heard it, a faint, broken sob. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at the screen. The call was still connected, my heart pounding as I glanced back at the rows of drawers. And then the lights flickered again. The flickering lights plunged the room into a stuttering, dizzying cycle of brightness and shadow. Each time the bulbs went dark, the hum of the cooling unit seemed to grow louder, almost suffocating, before fading back into the background when the lights returned. I stared at the drawers, my phone still clutched tightly in my hand, the faint sob from the disconnected call still echoing in my ears. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. But then I remembered. There's no signal down here. The only way to contact anyone is with the office phone, which is connected through a landline. "Stay calm," I muttered to myself, my voice trembling. "It's just the power. Just the hospital's old wiring acting up." But even as I said it, I couldn't convince myself. I paced the room, glancing at the door every few seconds. The man in scrubs had walked out just moments ago, but now it felt like hours ago. His words echoed in my mind. "No one's coming." The lights flickered one last time and stayed on, but the relief didn't come. The fluorescent glow was harsh, exposing every shadow in the corners, every imperfection in the room. That's when I noticed it. One of the drawers was open again. Not the one from earlier. This one was higher up, second row from the top. The drawer had slid out far enough to reveal the body inside, a man this time. His hand was exposed, hanging limply over the edge, the pale skin stark against the steel of the drawer. I stepped back, my chest heaving, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The drawer hadn't been open when the lights came back on. I was sure of it. I edged closer, my feet dragging like they were weighted. My breath hitched as I got closer, and I saw that his hand wasn't just limp. It was turned slightly upward, the fingers curled as if reaching for something. "No," I muttered, shaking my head. "This isn't happening. It's not possible." But my gut twisted with the same sick feeling I'd had earlier, the same sense that I wasn't as alone as I wanted to be. I reached out, grabbing the edge of the drawer, and slid it shut with a forceful motion. The latch clicked into place, the name tag swinging slightly. For a moment, I just stood there staring at it, my hands still gripping the handle. The radio crackled behind me, the sound loud enough to make me jump. I spun around, my heart pounding, and saw the small device on my desk. Static poured from it in uneven bursts, the faint strains of music barely audible. And then I heard it, words buried under the static, subtle, unclear. "Don't leave." My mouth went dry. I walked to the desk, my legs feeling weak, and stared at the radio. The static hissed again, even louder. "Don't leave me." I slammed the radio off. The morgue was silent again, but my thoughts weren't. I glanced back at the rows of drawers, each one a quiet reminder that I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone and stuffed it into my pocket, my mind made up. I wasn't staying down here another second. Forget protocol, forget the shift. Whatever was happening, I didn't want any part of it. As I reached the door, I heard it again, a knock. This time, it didn't sound like it was coming from the steel door. It sounded closer, much closer. The knock was soft at first, almost timid. I froze mid-step, my hand hovering over the door handle. It didn't come from behind me, it came from one of the drawers. My breath caught as I turned, my eyes scanning the rows of drawers along the far wall. The morgue was quiet again, the cooling units humming softly, the lights steady. But the knock came again. It was coming from the second row drawer, the one I just closed. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. My legs felt rooted to the floor, my mind screaming at me to leave, to run, but I couldn't move. The knock came a third time, followed by a soft, muffled sound. A voice. "Let me out." I staggered backward, my hand clutching the edge of the desk for support. My chest felt tight. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. "Stop it," I muttered to myself. "This isn't happening. It's not real." But the voice came again, clearer now, a woman's voice, soft and pleading. "Please, let me out." I backed away until I hit the far wall, my eyes locked on the drawer. The name tag swung slightly as though something had shifted inside. I don't know how long I stood there staring, frozen in place. Time seemed to stretch, the seconds bleeding into each other. My mind raced with every rational explanation I could come up with. Equipment malfunction, stress, sleep deprivation. But none of it made sense. The drawer creaked. It slid open slowly, and the metallic sound scraping against my nerves. The sheet covering the body shifted as it moved, revealing her face. The same elderly woman I'd seen earlier. Her eyes were still wide, unblinking, and that single tear still glistened on her cheek. And then she moved. Her hand twitched first, her fingers curling slightly before her arm began to lift. Her head turned slowly, her lifeless gaze locking onto mine. I stumbled forward, my vision swimming as panic overtook me. My hands grabbed the edge of the drawer, slamming it shut with all the strength I had left. The latch clicked, the sound echoing through the room. I backed away again, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. The drawer didn't move. The morgue was silent once more. I turned and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the elevator. My shaking hands jabbed at the buttons until the door slid shut, sealing me off from the morgue. The ride up felt like an eternity, the fluorescent light of the elevator harsh against my eyes. When the doors opened to the brightly lit hospital corridor, I stumbled out, leaning against the wall to catch my breath. The normalcy of the scene felt jarring. The faint chatter of nurses at the station, the distant beeping of monitors, the hum of life all around me. I stayed there for a long time, my back pressed against the wall, my thoughts a mess. I didn't go back to the morgue that night. The next day, I handed in my resignation. I told them I couldn't handle the night shifts anymore, that the isolation was getting to me. They didn't ask many questions. People rarely stay long in that job anyway. I haven't set foot in the hospital since. I never heard back from the hospital either. If that woman really was alive and needed help, God, I'm sorry. But in a situation like that, how could I not be completely overwhelmed by fear? And not hearing anything afterward? It only made it worse. It made it feel all the more real. Sometimes I think about that night. I tell myself it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that the stress and the quiet got to me more than I realized. But late at night, when the house is silent, I'll hear it again in my head. The weeping sob of her. And every time I hear it, I know I made the right choice to leave.